Hey y'all, it's Mary Hyatt, and I'm so excited you're here for this month's topic, which is all about emotional intelligence. Y'all, we are emotional beings, and yet most of us have no idea how to talk about our emotions, feel them, or process them. But don't worry, we have a whole month to make you an emotional genius to improve your relationships and your life. So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Living Fully Alive podcast with Mary Hyatt, here to help you find your authentic voice, learn how to love yourself, and embrace your life. And now, your host, life and mindset coach, body love advocate, and doTERRA Presidential Diamond, Mary Hyatt.
Hey y'all, real quick before we hop into today's episode, I am so excited to share a new resource with you that I'm so passionate about. I have created an anxiety recovery kit for you. It's all for free. I'm going to give you 3 separate audio guided meditations specifically around stress and anxiety. And I even have one for panic attacks, plus a specific breathing technique proven to help you lower your cortisol levels and calm your stress and anxiety, plus my favorite essential oil recipes for supporting anxious feelings. So follow the link below or head over to maryhyatt.com/recovery kit, RECOVERYKIT, to snag your anxiety kit as a personal gift from yours truly. All right, now here's this week's episode. Hey y'all, it is Mary, and I am so excited to be back with you after quite a little bit of a break. I took the month of January off from the podcast to just rest and rejuvenate. And I'm so glad that I did that because I feel so excited to come back this month, especially because we are going to take a deep dive into emotional intelligence this month. Man, I feel like I could probably have an entire podcast about this one topic, and it just seems to be coming up all over the place for me. And the more and more that I do this work and I begin to learn why we do what we do and how we can enter into living more fully alive, I cannot escape this emphasis on our emotions, how we feel our way through life. So this month we're going to be exploring emotions themselves, how to feel them, how to process them, our blocks to them, and also how to have good emotional intelligence. So make sure to listen to the following episodes because, man, it's going to be an awesome month. But I can remember, if I rewind in my own personal journey of getting to the place where now I feel really comfortable experiencing my emotions. I feel really just practiced in feeling what I'm feeling and learning how to ride the wave of my emotions and ultimately get to a place of self-regulating. But if I rewind the clock a little bit, several years ago, before I started doing all of this deep work, I was numb. Like, I wanted to be numb. I didn't want to feel. I did my best to escape feeling reality. It all really felt too overwhelming and too painful. And so I numbed. I numbed by coping and stuffing, avoiding, denying my feelings. And I think unconsciously that ultimately felt more safe. I can remember feeling that if I actually let myself feel what was inside, I was certainly going to end up in a loony bin. Like, I was convinced, like, I really thought that, y'all. Like, the few times that I had let myself feel, my emotions exploded. They erupted. They scared me, honestly. And I think it scared me too because they would happen out of nowhere. Like, I'd be watching a movie and suddenly I'd just start crying. And if I was alone, I'd be like bawling. Even for like a long time after the credits rolled, I'd just be weeping. And I wouldn't even know why I was crying. I knew that the movie was fictional. It wasn't my real life, but it made me cry. Or something would happen, like let's say with my ex-husband, and this only happened a few times, but it was, a couple times that scared me ultimately, but I would just like lose it. Like, it's almost as if all this stuff had built up, and I would just get so incredibly angry that I would yell, I would shake, I would cry until I would finally have to storm out of the house and take a drive just to calm down. Or I would have like a series of panic attacks that felt like they came out of nowhere, seemingly like not related to actual life events. And my job then became to make sure that that didn't happen again, to push down all of those feelings as deep as I could, because I was certain that they would take me over. Like if I actually went into it, if I actually was honest with how I felt, I was convinced, I was certain that I wouldn't be able to recover. Like I had flashes of images of me being checked into a psychiatric hospital. It felt that intense. And then, you just kind of get on with your normal day and your normal life. And all of this is happening below the surface. But for me, it became a game of sidestepping, climbing over, burying them down deep, getting around, like trying to completely circumvent my life where I didn't have to feel what was really, really true. And I had a life to keep up with. And you think about this, I hope that there are parts of my journey and my story where you can relate, even if it didn't feel that intense for you. I think this is oftentimes our relationships with our emotions. Most of us are scared to feel the full range of emotions. Like maybe we have a few that are like sanctioned emotions that we sort of let ourselves feel. Maybe we let ourselves cry, but we don't let ourselves feel angry. Or we allow ourselves to maybe feel sad, but we never want to feel a sense of being lonely. So we have sort of these sanctioned and unsanctioned emotions. But I think ultimately we're scared to feel anything too intensely. Even when trauma strikes or tragedy hits, we close up, we shut down, we tighten. We have this fear around our emotional process. And if you happen to be a woman listening, which I would imagine most of you are, most likely you have received messages to not be too emotional, too bitchy, too PMSy, too strong, too loud, too bossy, too angry. Like, you don't want to end up as one of those women who are out of control. I will have more on that saga later. But here's the problem, right? It's like we have been taught to fear our emotions. And then we disassociate from our emotional experience. We disconnect from our emotional life. And this kind of disassociation from our feelings perhaps works as a survival mechanism in the short term, like it's there for a reason. It is our body's way to handle intense stress, intense trauma, all of that. But when we aren't able to learn how to feel and process our emotions that are happening to us in a daily, hourly, minute by minute basis in a healthy way, long term, then we can never truly be fully alive. Like we have to be able to feel and experience what is happening, because the truth is we are all having an emotional experience right now. Like if I were to ask you right now just to take a moment, take a breath, just kind of inhale deeply, exhale, drop into the heart if you can, and just sort of notice, like, what is the emotion that I am feeling the most right now? Just take a moment. Like, what are you feeling? What is sort of the strongest emotion that you might be feeling right now? Without judgment, without criticizing, without needing it to be any different, what are you feeling? This is a question that you probably have listened to me in my guided meditations ask often, because it's so important to be able to relate to our emotional experience through life. That is life. The emotional experience that we are having at any given moment is life. But because we have dampened and suppressed and covered up and sort of relegated most of our emotional experience to our subconscious, we're, like I said, oftentimes very unaware of what is going on inside of ourselves. But in order to live fully alive, we have to befriend our emotions instead of fearing them. And I think that the first way that we do this is to get clear on what they actually are. I mean, I think a lot of fear comes from the unknown. And if we have this prejudgment towards an emotional experience based on our history and our past and the things that we've been taught about emotions and about being a woman, there can be a lot of unspoken fear around our emotions. So I think if we can bring some light to this and explain like, okay, here's what they actually are, I think it'll dissipate some of that fear. And I know that I am not alone in that kind of confusion / fear / denial with our emotions, because many of my group coaching clients, my one-on-one coaching clients, share that fear. I mean, a lot of them are terrified of their emotions. They have this irrational fear that their emotions are going to kill them. I remember listening to a podcast by Brooke Castillo, and she said, many of us spend a lot of time resisting our emotions because we are afraid of what that experience of them will be, because we associate the experience of an emotion to what it's like to experience it after we have resisted it because it exploded. Like oftentimes what we think is like a normal emotion, like anger or fear or sadness or grief or loneliness, what we actually think is the emotion is what we experience after we have suppressed it so much that it like comes out through intensity, like I was mentioning in my own story. But that's not maybe the normal experience of the vibration of that emotion. It's like the exploding of the emotion isn't the emotion itself. It's that is the intensity comes from bearing it, from suppressing it. So I really feel like, because I know many of y'all have not truly felt emotions in a really long time, maybe you're not familiar with them, you probably don't even have a vocabulary for expressing them. Hey y'all, I just wanted to interrupt this episode real quick to remind you to subscribe to this podcast. I know that emails get lost in your spam folder, so subscribing means my episodes come right to your phone. So go ahead, hit that quick little subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of the Living Fully Alive episodes. Plus, in addition to subscribing to the podcast, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. I don't know if you know this, but I have been releasing guided meditations every Monday over on YouTube, and you're not going to hear them here. So if you've been wanting to start an easy meditation practice, subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss out on my short 15-minute guided meditations. All right, now back to this week's episode. You have this sense that they're going to be too intense, they're going to take you over, and you're not going to let yourself feel loneliness, anger, rejection, fear, desire, pleasure. And if you kind of did what I did, which is basically to numb or to go into hyper control, then there are parts of you that get shut down. Tara Brach, who's one of my favorite authors and speakers, she said, when an emotion feels too intense and when we don't want to integrate because the pain is too strong, we end up shutting down and avoiding and numbing and disassociating. And that is the survival response. That keeps us in a survival state. And that is not living. That is not thriving. That is existing in survival. And it's quite honestly exhausting. And it creates a really strong disconnection from our hearts and our bodies. And if you listened to the month that we had all about the mind-body connection, go back and listen to all of those episodes if you haven't already. There is a really incredible and just like absolutely intelligent, brilliant connection of the mind and the body. But this comes out sideways in illness, in dis-ease, in pain, in a physical disharmony within our bodies when we don't address our emotions. So we have to befriend our emotions. We've got to learn to cope with them without trying to find a way to numb or dull or disassociate from them. So let's explore the anatomy of emotions. What are emotions? And I kind of want to start with the most obvious answer from good old Wikipedia. So I just typed in, of course, like, what are emotions? And it says that emotion is a mental state associated with the nervous system brought on by chemical changes variously associated with thoughts, feelings, behavioral responses, and a degree of pleasure or displeasure. There is currently no scientific consensus on a definition. Like, oh, great. Thanks. That's really helpful. I feel like I'm like, this is why emotions seem to be so elusive. I mean, very rarely do we even think about science or biology when we think about emotions. It's almost like this unspoken, like spiritual thing that is happening inside of ourselves. That's at least how we interpret it. It's like, it's just how we feel. I would say that most people have no idea why we feel the way that we feel. And I think if you've been to therapy, you have a general idea that events produce emotions. And sometimes we still feel things from our past, like grief over someone passing years ago, or anger towards a parent for something that happened in childhood, for example. But to understand the anatomy of emotions, what are they really? If we go from this sort of undefined, there's no consensus of what it actually is, I think there actually is quite a lot of information out there. And I have pieced a lot of it together through many amazing people that I have been reading, and just through my own experience of studying this mind-body connection. So the first fact of the anatomy of our emotions is that emotions are residual chemical records of the past. I'm going to read that again and I'll explain. Emotions are residual chemical records of the past. Now hang with me because I'm going to get a little scientific, but I think this will be really helpful. So the body doesn't know the difference between the original event that created the emotional stress response in the first place and the memory of the event. The chemical reaction in the body is the same, as though it were happening all over again. The memory of the emotion makes you feel like you are reliving the past all over again, and your body is going to think so too. So what happens is the body sends out stress hormones. It activates the sympathetic nervous system, that fight, flight, or freeze response within the body. It stresses the immune system and throws us into that survival response. Just the memory of something that has happened in the past can produce the same chemistry in your brain and body as though it were all happening again. Most of what we feel is actually a well-rehearsed memory of an emotion. Listen to that again. This is just absolutely like mind-blowing to me. Most of what we feel is actually a well-rehearsed memory of an emotion. It's hardwired into our brain. So it is actually a neural pathway that gets created within the brain. So the chemistry gets triggered by a thought, a familiar experience, a smell, or something familiar in our environment, and it fires up that old emotional memory. And the more you replay an old event, for example, or the more that you get triggered, you are just deepening or rewiring that chemistry from your past into your brain and your body in the present. So Dr. Joe Dispenza, if you have not followed him or listened to him or read anything from him, I highly recommend, oh my gosh, just literally any book, start with it. Dr. Joe Dispenza. I'll link to a couple of my favorites, but he has been somebody that I have unknowingly by him been mentored by. He has been incredibly formative in helping me learn about emotions. But he says emotions are the chemical consequences or feedback of past experiences. As our senses record incoming information from the environment, it creates a cluster of neurons that organize into networks, and then they freeze into a pattern that your brain makes, and then a chemical gets sent out throughout the body, and the chemical is called an emotion. I mean, isn't that just fascinating? So we can remember events better when we can remember how they feel. The stronger the emotional experience of the event, whether it's good or bad, the stronger the change is going to be in our internal chemistry. So let me just kind of explain this in a little bit more tangible way, because I think that is obviously heady and scientific. But I lead live in-person workshops, and I often do an exercise with my audience as they are learning how to feel their emotions. I'm going to kind of explain it to you. I think it will flesh this out a little bit more. So when I have them feel emotions, the first thing that I do is we start with an unpleasant emotion, let's say anxiety. And I ask them to think about whatever they need to think about to allow themselves to feel anxious right now. I give them a few minutes to conjure up old memories, past records of anxiety producing moments until they physically and emotionally are experiencing anxiety right then in the present moment. And then what's amazing is that I have them instantly, without any kind of transition, do this for another emotion. And this time I have them experience something more positive like gratitude. And say, all right, whatever you need to think about to create the feeling and the emotional and the physical experience of gratitude, do it. And then they think about whatever that they are grateful for as they recount how blessed they are within their lives. They feel gratitude. It's a kind of mental rehearsal that is producing the familiar hardwired chemical response in the body that triggers the memorized, learned emotional response. And this is happening all throughout our day. And again, we're usually unconscious to it, so we're not aware that this is going on. But anytime that we're feeling something, there has been a chemical response within the body first that then produces the emotion. And that chemical response in the body is that the memory of something that is familiar to something that has happened in the past that produced that emotion. So what is fascinating is that this thought or memory of an experience activates the chemistry of the emotion. And that results in a person feeling a certain way. So this is what actors do all the time. If you think about it, they get themselves into an emotional state of the character that they are playing. And they do this, if you think about, somebody having to play like a woman who's lost her husband, for example. They do this by using their own memories to generate very intense emotional states to create the character that they're playing. Now, they may have never experienced that exact thing, but there are things that have happened within their past that elicit that emotion of grief or loss or sadness or loneliness. And when we watch movies and we see these characters play out these parts, we resonate with it. It's like, okay, well, why do I cry sometimes in movies? It's like, it's a resonance. It's like, it's so real. It's so believable. And I have memories of what this character is playing that it's triggering that chemical response in my body. But this is what is happening for a character, for an actor. But here's what's crazy. They might be pretending, quote unquote, pretending, but their biology doesn't know that they're playing a part. They've actually done some studies where they studied the immune response, the stress response, and the impact that this has on their physical body. And it shows that even when you're pretending to be somebody that you're not and pretending to have an emotional experience, because you have to access all of that within the mind that creates that chemical response in the body, your body thinks it's happening right here, right now. It doesn't know the difference between fact or fiction. And I think what is helpful is when you begin to realize this, you suddenly have the power to generate new emotions by shifting your thoughts. I mean, if I told you to get really, really happy right now, and if you sort of just surrendered to the process and decided to not have resistance, you could get yourself in a state of happiness. Or if I said, I want you to get really, really sad right now, you could do it. Like literally within seconds, you could generate that emotion. And all of a sudden you have access to design your emotional experience through life. And this becomes really liberating because then you are no longer a victim of your unconscious remembering that is sort of just like this pattern in the brain that's just repeating itself over and over again unconsciously, that is replaying unpleasant emotions. And now you have some say-so into creating your emotional experience through life. We're going to talk more about how to do that in a later episode. So like I said, tune into future episodes. But the second fact about the anatomy of emotions is that the emotions are vibrations in the body. This is probably like one of those that is just the most liberating for me. They are just vibrations. They are just a frequency. So for example, when we think about the physiological response that our bodies are having to the chemistry that's being produced, you are going to see that emotions are a response to a sensation or a change within the body. So for example, fear is the vibration and the frequency that causes your heart to race, your breathing to shorten, your chest to tighten, your cortisol spikes, maybe your perspiration increases. This is a vibration. It is a frequency within the body. John Bradshaw says, emotions are energy in motion. Emotions are energy in motion. And the motion comes through sensations within our bodies. That's why there are physical sensations that are happening with each emotion. And the more attuned we can become to these different emotional experiences, we will begin to feel that in the body first. It's like, oh, when we are nervous, we feel nauseated. We feel like a fluttering in the chest. We might feel a coolness in our body. When we are in a state of passion, for example, our body heats up, our skin becomes flush. It's amazing to see what the body does with these emotions, this energy in motion. Tara Brach says, all our reactions to people, to situations, to thoughts in our mind are actually reactions to the kind of sensations that are arising in our body. It is an energetic vibration. It is a frequency. And you can literally even measure in hertz the frequency of each emotion. Gratitude has a really, really, really high hertz frequency. And then if you go all the way down to lust, that has the lowest vibrational frequency. And you can measure this. It's scientific. You can measure it. They are vibrations within the body. Okay, the third fact of our emotional anatomy is that emotions are not your identity. They are something that you experience, but they are not who you are. They only become attached to your identity when you use them to describe who you are, when you attach them to the description of your identity, of your personality, even though they are just emotions. So we all have emotions that maybe we feel more often or more frequently. I like to refer to this sometimes as your emotional home. Like what is the, what are the rooms in your house, the emotions, your emotional home? Where do you hang out most often? Where do you sort of fall into? What are your well-worn patterns of emotional vibrational frequency? And these emotions are going to feel real, but they are an emotional state. They are not who you are. You are not the emotion. And it would be more accurate to say something like, I am feeling happiness instead of I am happy, or I am feeling anxious versus I am an anxious person. You might feel depressed, but you aren't depressed. They are not your identity. They are detached from you. These emotional experiences are part of your story, but they do not define you unless you interpret or attach yourself to them. So I think that's really liberating, because it's like, man, maybe you've had the emotional experience of anxiety for a long, long time, but it doesn't have to be part of your identity. Like that is something that can shift and that can change, and that is learned by the chemistry of your body. And that can be shifted and changed as well. Fourth fact is feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. So feelings are an interpretation of what is happening in the real world, in the chemistry of our bodies. And they are often a rehearsed memory of our past, right? So when I say that they aren't fact, it doesn't mean that they're not real. It just means that how we feel about something doesn't make it true. And it might not relate to the actual, like, real, true present moment. Like it might feel real, but it's not true. So like if you feel fat, it doesn't make you fat. Fat is not a feeling. That's like one of my favorite things a therapist said to me once. She was like, fat is not a feeling. Or if you said, she was mean, That is your interpretation of your experience with her that could be influenced by a predisposition to mean people. Danielle Laporte, she says, feelings are neither the facts of what actually happened, nor of a shared reality. They are indicators of your personal reality. So if you think about it this way, circumstances are neutral. Like what happens to you is neutral. They are non-emotional. Events are neither good or bad, happy or sad, horrible or amazing, until we attach our own interpretation on them. And it is our interpretation of what is happening that generates the emotional experience. It is our perception that is informed by everything that has happened up to us up until this point. Our values, our belief systems, along with our biology and our chemical response, as we just learned about, that elicits this emotional response. And it may have nothing to do with what is actually happening. So think about like a real extreme example, like PTSD for just a moment. Like let's say somebody experiences an event that gets interpreted as really traumatic and scary and fear-producing and triggers the sympathetic nervous system to go on overdrive, fight, flight, or freeze. And then fast forward and something happens, like let's say fireworks. The body goes, I remember this, go into overdrive. It clicks in, it triggers that chemical response of fear or panic or shutdown or whatever that might be. And the reality is that man is not actually in war anymore. Like it could be the 4th of July, for example, but the body experiences it as real. So the emotional experience isn't fact. It doesn't actually relate to what is really happening. Because if you think about anything in life is neutral, like when it happens, it is neutral. Even things that we think are horrible are neutral until based on our belief systems, based on our value systems, based on what we have been fed and taught. That is how we interpret things as bad or good, evil or not, or tragic or not. You know, it's like the same event could happen to two people and they interpret it in different ways and have two emotional responses based on how they interpret that. So you cannot think about feeling as facts. Now, that is not to say that feelings don't matter or should be dismissed or aren't important because they're not fact. I would actually argue that emotions and feelings are perhaps one of the most important pieces of feedback that we have that can help determine the quality of our lives. They help us know when to say yes. They help us know when to say no. They help us prioritize what's important to us. It's our feedback loop. They help us move towards wholeness and away from disharmony within ourselves. They show us where we are out of balance, where we might need some loving attention and healing. I mean, I really believe that our emotions are vitally important to living fully alive. They become our beacon to our truest selves. They are the road sign to our soul's destination. But I think it's really important to remember that our feelings are not fact. Our feelings are not fact. So, all in all, I hope that through this very brief and I know like quick kind of surface level conversation about the anatomy of emotions, my hope is though that you have a new understanding of emotions. You know, my goal this month is to make our emotional experience feel less scary, more tangible, so that you can sort of gradually give yourself permission to feel more. And throughout this month, I'm going to offer some tools on how to process your emotions, how to expand your emotional vocabulary so that you can have a way to express more accurately what you are experiencing, and ultimately give you more power to let in more of the good and to feel a experience of life that is more alive. Like when I think about being alive, it's feeling the emotions, good, bad, ugly, like all of it. And when you can remember that emotions are not facts, that you are not your emotions, that they really cannot hurt you because they are just an energy, they're just vibration, and that emotions are often hardwired in the brain and biologically conditioned in the body through past memories, we don't have to be afraid of them. You know, I truly believe that we can bring light and clarity to this part of our human experience. the more knowledge that we have. It can ease our resistance to want to stop feeling our feelings. My hope is that understanding that having emotions is a normal physiological response of our body. It's like literally part of how we were created. There's nothing about feelings that is a character defect or something that we are flawed in for feeling angry or for feeling resentful. That part of our human experience is feeling this rainbow of emotions, that it's normal, and that there are really effective and liberating ways to process and move through them so that we aren't controlled by them. So they don't come out in unhealthy ways when we've had a long time of repressing them and stuffing them down, but that we actually have some real tools to move through our emotional experience. Because to me, the more we feel, ultimately, it's like, who really cares? To me, not only do I really believe it shifts the quality of your life, but I think what's most important to me is the more we feel, the more we can allow ourselves to feel, then we have so much more empathy towards other people. And so when you see people who are getting upset or angry or fearful or anxious or depressed or whatever it might be, it's like, oh, this is literally going on inside of their brain. This is like chemistry of the body. This is an actual physical sensation. This is an actual energetic vibration happening in the body. It's not that that person is weak or that they are unable to control themselves. It's like, this is something that is literally happening inside of themselves. And there is so much information about this. I mean, this is a conversation and a topic that we could go into so much scientific and researched data to express and explain the neurological process that happens with the anatomy of our emotions. And for the sake of the fact that I am not a doctor, nor a chemist, nor a therapist, I'm not going to get into all of that. But I think that it just helps to normalize it. And I think to make us feel like we're not crazy and that our response to life is something that we can enhance and practice and feel without fear. So I'm excited to be with you next week with my part-time co-host, Lindsley Brooks. So I hope that you share this episode with somebody. I hope that you begin to find some more resources if this is interesting to you, to learn more about it, of course. And if nothing else, tune in next week and be with us as we discuss this even further. All right, y'all. Until the next episode, just remember that the purpose of life is to be grateful, to be great, and to be full. I'll see y'all next week. Bye. Hey y'all, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some amazing nuggets to take home and start implementing into your life. And if you're looking for the show notes and links, head on over to maryhyatt.com/show. And if you loved it, why not bring your girlfriends along this journey of becoming fully alive with you? Just give a quick share of this episode to your social channels and enjoy those debriefing convos with your besties. Thanks again, and I can't wait to connect with you next week.